Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bev Lang, and I'm the Executive Officer with Elder Abuse Action Australia. Before we commence this very interesting webinar this afternoon, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, wherever we might be meeting, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. I'm on Darkinjung land on the central coast of New South Wales, about an hour and a half north of Sydney. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session. These sessions give our members the opportunity to showcase their work and share their learned knowledge and experience with a growing audience of people from the sector and community members. We're really thrilled that Lunch and Learn is getting a bit of a life of its own, having been rebooted late last year. Before I introduce our speakers this morning, I'd just like to do a little bit of housekeeping. Please use the chat to ask any questions. You can also use the Q&A feature. Please be respectful in your interactions with each other and, of course, the speakers. As we have multiple presenters today, please include the name of the presenter for your question in terms of who it's directed to in the chat, and each presenter will respond to as many questions as possible at the end of the collective presentations. If your question isn't answered during the session, we'll endeavour to compile all unanswered questions and share the responses with everyone who's registered for this webinar. Please turn CC captions on your device should you require that. It's enabled in the back end. This session will be recorded and published on the EAAA site, but it will also be first shared with anyone who's registered for this webinar, and there are currently close to 400 people who have. The Q&A will be at the end of the three presentations, and would, of course, appreciate your feedback in the survey that'll pop up right at the end of the webinar. We're fortunate to have three presenters today from Better Place Australia, all speaking about dignity in action, respecting older people's voices. In this session, we'll dive into powerful case studies that show how social workers from Better Place Australia are handling issues like capacity, misidentification, and client safety. Our speakers today, in order of their presentations, are Rhonda Withers. Rhonda is the General Manager, Older People's Services at Better Place Australia. She is an experienced registered nurse and senior healthcare manager with over 20 years of service in community and residential aged care across Australia. Dr. Sarah Marco is a research officer with Better Place Australia's Centre for Better Relationships. She's a public health researcher who specialises in qualitative research methods and online surveys. Graham Westerway has held executive and senior leadership roles across the not-for-profit, mutual and corporate sectors. He's a board member of Family and Relationship Services Australia and was instrumental in the development of the social support model of response to elder abuse in Victoria. He has a passion for raising ageism awareness and respecting the right of all people to self-determination. Please join me in welcoming the Better Place Australia team. And I'd like to now start with Rhonda.
Thank you. Thanks, Bev. Thanks for having us here today. We're really excited to be here today. I just wanted to start with a little bit of an introduction about Better Place Australia and who we are and what we do. Every year we support around 11,000 clients across Victoria, and we employ over 150 staff. We have a really wide variety of services, including mental health counselling, parenting support, financial and relationship counselling, and elder abuse prevention. We commenced our elder abuse prevention program in 2018 with a grant from the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. We had delivered this service through the innovative integrated model of care to address elder abuse early, integrating therapeutic and mediation services, including family meetings. When the OMOC funding ceased in 2023, we have now transitioned into creating Victoria's only specialised elder abuse service for victim survivors, and we're currently funded in 5 out of the 18 Orange Door regions across Victoria. Most of our referrals now come through the Orange Door, and this is often following police incidents. Funding constraints with this funding has led to limited our ability, I should say, to be able to provide prevention, as we are needing to have a more crisis-focused response, despite older people wanting early intervention. BPA also auspices the Elder Abuse Prevention Network and participates on state-level roundtables and various family violence networks across Australia. Now I'm going to hand you over to Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Rhonda. So as Bev mentioned, I'm Dr. Sarah Marco, a research officer at Better Places Centre for Better Relationships, which is the research and advocacy arm of Better Place. So my portion of the presentation today is about some findings from a recent community survey that we conducted that was exploring older Victorians' preferences for elder abuse service. So we'll just move to the next slide. So we conducted a mixed methods online survey. Community members who participated didn't have to have lived experience of elder abuse. Instead, the purpose of the survey was to gain a broad understanding of older adults' preferences if they were to experience mistreatment. And you'll see today some similarities between what the community say they think that they would want compared to the case studies that Rhonda will be presenting today. So the aim of the survey was to understand how likely it was that older Victorians would reach out for support if they were mistreated by a family member or carer, what support services they would like to engage with, and the factors that might prevent them from seeking help. So in terms of who completed the survey, it was 539 people who are older Victorians. There were slightly more women, but there was a relatively good spread in terms of age. I will note, though, that the perspectives of people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds hasn't adequately been captured. That's because the vast majority of participants were born in Australia or the UK. So this graph shows the percentage of participants who stated that they were likely to seek help if a family member or carer treated them in specific ways. The behaviours that we asked about were adapted from the Elder Abuse Suspicion Index, which is used by GPs to identify potential abuse. And the graph shows that older Victorians were most likely to think that they would seek help if they were prevented from getting food, clothes, or medical care. And they were least likely to seek help if they were treated in a way that made them feel shamed or threatened. So this aligns with previous research that has basically shown that victim survivors of elder abuse often view psychological abuse as being less severe as other forms. And when considering the gender differences, men were significantly less likely to seek support if they were mistreated in 4 of the 6 ways that we asked about. So this next graph, we also asked participants who they would likely contact first if they were mistreated. And participants could select up to 3 options. So participants most frequently selected family members, friends, and general practitioners, which will link to the next slide as well. But I will note that in terms of differences between men and women, there were minimal differences. However, men were more likely to say that they would contact police than women were. So we had a couple of open-ended response questions. So we asked participants who they would likely turn to for support and the types of support that they would like to receive. So the most common theme was that they would first reach out to someone that they already trusted. So this was often a family member, a close friend, or their general practitioner. And that was best captured by one participant who wrote, "I would probably ask other family members for help or my GP. I would also ask my best friend for advice." So as highlighted in the quote, these trusted people that they would reach out to were often seen as a safe place to start, so a sounding board for emotional support and advice before deciding what next steps they would want to take. For some people, this kind of informal support was they thought this would be enough, and that they would only really reach out to formal services if the behaviours escalated. And beyond informal social support, participants also highlighted a range of services that they would want to engage with. So responses were quite mixed in terms of wanting professional social services, legal pathways, or a mix of both. The most common type of service that was mentioned was counselling and psychological support, and others focused on third-party professionals who could facilitate discussions or negotiations between the older person and the person using violence. When participants described what they wanted from police, it was both in terms of ensuring their personal safety and stopping the abusive behaviour, but also in terms of helping the older person to understand what options are available and what their rights were. And a small group of participants also emphasised the need for independent and neutral sources of information. And the 3 quotes on the screen really highlight how older people have different preferences. So the first person describes an advocacy group who would be able to host mediation between themselves and the person using violence. The second focuses on court orders to restrict behaviours. And the third essentially describes a specialised service to provide advice. So regardless of which pathway people want, a key aspect that comes through is that older people want to understand what their options are and be able to make informed, empowered decisions about what to do next. So we also asked in the survey about why older people might hesitate to contact support services. And the overwhelming response was fear. So they described how seeking support might make things worse in terms of escalating the abusive behaviour. Some suggested that seeking help could undermine an older person's independence or risk their access to care, particularly when the person using violence is also their carer. Another reason was about the uncertainty around what services are available to them and who to contact for support. Some participants suggested that when an older person reaches out for formal support, they might be a bit scared that they won't be taken seriously, or that their concerns might be dismissed. And what participants said is that older people might be seen as being too old or senile, as one person put it. Another reason was also relating to shame and embarrassment. So participants suggested that people might not seek support because they feel stupid or foolish for what they've experienced. They might be ashamed that the family member treats them this way, or there might be a bit of shame around not being able to handle the situation themselves and thinking that they should be able to. And the final reason that people might hesitate to seek help is, I guess, this fear around unintended negative consequences. So that's both in terms of disturbing family peace. People often spoke about not wanting to cause a fuss, but then also some fear around getting the family member who's using violence in trouble with the law. So what all of this means in terms of elder abuse responses, just on the next slide, is that the findings highlight that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to elder abuse. Regardless of if they want informal support or social services or legal pathways, the main idea across the survey responses is that older people want advice and guidance about what options are available to them. The findings also emphasise the need for both social and legal pathways, and that support services should be tailored to their own preferences because everyone has their own preference. The final point I want to make is that services really need to be mindful about these reasons why people might hesitate to contact services, particularly when communicating the nature of the service to the community. So that is the end of my section of the presentation, and I will hand back to Rhonda.
Thank you, Sarah. So today I'm going to discuss why social supports and interventions can be more reflective of the preferences of older people and their families. So I will go through some information in regards to that, and I will end with a couple of case studies. So in listening to Sarah's research that she's done, what I'm going to speak about now is what we're seeing in our elder abuse service. So what we often see is that with legal intervention priorities, that sometimes safety and abuse protection is the number one priority. And this can often neglect the voice, emotional and social aspects of the older person and may overlook self-determination. We also see that victim survivors often want to, their preference is not to have police involvement, and this is primarily due to wanting to remain in a relationship with the person using violence, which I will refer to as PUV during this presentation. Also, it's about that dignity of risk and listening to what the older person wants. So we are currently seeing most of our referrals that are coming through now are coming through following a serious police incident. There are differences between elder abuse and mainstream family violence. And some of these are that in elder abuse, the person using violence can be familial or non-familiar or a carer. And what we're currently seeing at the moment is our highest number of perpetrators would be adult son, really closely followed by adult daughter at the moment, and then intimate partner. And we are starting to see more grandchildren coming through in our elder abuse clients. The primary driver for elder abuse is ageism. And in our service, we are a non-gendered service, and we access community legal services such as Senior Rights Victoria. There's no programs for persons using violence specifically for elder abuse. In mainstream family violence, there is a big focus on men's behavioural change programs. And one of the biggest challenges that we face in elder abuse is the amount of crisis accommodation that's available that specifically meets the needs of older people. Most crisis accommodation doesn't meet the needs of older people, and we need to access emergency respite, usually within an aged care setting. Next slide, please. And what we're seeing is pretty much what Sarah has found in her research as well, is that the reasons for older people being reluctant to speak up include fear, and that can be that reporting the abuse could lead to further harm or neglect. And this is especially if the person using violence is the caregiver. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment about elder abuse. Also, older people not recognising that what is happening to them is in fact elder abuse. And there may be that distrust of authorities due to past negative experiences. So when we look at the MARAM risk assessment, evidence-based assessment for lethality, all of those risk factors also apply to elder abuse. However, we do have specific additional risk factors when it comes to elder abuse. And the first one is what I mentioned before in terms of multiple PUVs. So we have worked with victim survivors where there might be multiple perpetrators. There might be a number of the siblings. So that sometimes it can become very challenging to actually identify who the perpetrator is. And our social workers must be very creative to work with that system. One of the biggest issues that we face is perpetrators living with the victim survivor as the carer. And a common theme that we also see that presents as a risk factor is the adult child living with the victim survivor that may have long-standing alcohol and drug issues, as well as unemployment issues. And we do see quite a lot of adult children that have never left the family home, and that is a red flag for us. Contact limitations, because the victim survivor may be living with the perpetrator. We often have different communication challenges, making safe contact with the older person. And that might be because their phone's been taken off them. There may be technology barriers. But I have popped a an example of an email that we sent to a client who was only able to communicate with us through email. So our social workers became creative and made up emails that looked like brochures and sales, and put the content of the safety plan and relevant information in the bottom of the email. And that also, debunks the feeling that older people can't use technology. There's also some of the other risks in our elder abuse cases is risk of homelessness. Hoarding is something that we've seen an increase in, and this is leading to very unsafe living conditions. And what it does is put barriers for service providers to attend the property safely. And we know that older people with disabilities and from CALD backgrounds, that creates additional risk factors as well. Currently in our service, around 30% of our clients are from a CALD background. There's a lot of protection around the person using violence, as well as family violence might be seen as a private matter and not something that needs to be publicly reported. We also see issues arising from remarriages and blended families. We've had incidents of misidentification, older people being misidentified as the person using violence. I'll go into a case study a little bit later about that one, and also working with older LGBTI folk with complex trauma histories. One of the biggest challenges in working with elder abuse is working with victim survivors with cognitive decline. The person using violence can often speak for the victim survivor and weaponize that the cognitive decline that the victim survivor is experiencing. There are some legal services that do not support victim survivors with cognitive decline, so their voice does not get heard. We very much take a health lens approach with our social work model, where a health lens is focused, and there's a really deep understanding about the psychological and emotional abuse and what that stress can affect cognitive decline as well as physical health. But there's also concerns with intentional neglect. This can be where the person using violence withholds medical appointments, refuses healthcare, home care services to come into the home, and not providing the older person with critical medications. Through our trauma-informed support and strength-based practice, our team of social workers assist with interventions for elder abuse victim survivors include our service is non-gender specific. We can have anywhere between 30 to 50% of our victim survivors as being male. So in alignment with our MARAM framework, our team of social workers provides these essential services around safety planning, comprehensive risk assessment, respecting the client's dignity of risk, and crisis support. We will involve the family when it's safe and appropriate to do so. We also, within our case management service, have a wraparound case management for persons using violence, and through information sharing schemes, we are able to work with other organisations to look at how the PUV is being supported with housing, mental health services, alcohol and drug issues. And this really helps with monitoring the safety of our clients, and having the person using violence keeping an eye on what they are doing. We also provide warm referrals to our own financial counselling service, legal binding mediation. Aged care navigation has become a very big part of the case management service, as well as housing support. We will always empower our clients to express their needs and maintain their dignity. We will liaise with police and legal services. We will support clients when applying for IVOs, with family. We'll also work with other family violence agencies, legal services, and the judicial system, including RAMP. Next slide, please. There's a lot of discussion in the industry about the benefits of IVO for elder abuse victim survivors. I'll just touch on what some of the benefits are and what some of the hindrances are. So a benefit of an IVO is securing immediate safety. It can also disrupt any acute situations that are arising, and it can increase safety for the victim survivor. It also helps to provide a mechanism to remove children from potentially harmful environments. As I mentioned before, we are seeing children increasingly involved in our cases because of some of the cost of living crisis and also housing shortages. IVOs can be tailored to respect the older person's preferences. For an example, they can prohibit the person using violence from approaching within 200 metres of the home, but allowing contact in safe public places. IVOs do keep the person using violence accountable and within sight of the system, and there will be clear consequences for people for the PUVs when they breach an IVO. They also send a really strong message to the PUV and the community that elder abuse is a crime. And it also helps allow victim services to access older people, implement safety plans, and review services for their benefit. There are quite a lot of hindrances and barriers to reporting breaches to police. And the biggest reason for this is the reluctance to report IVO breaches. We know that older victim survivors will call 000 for immediate safety, but they are reluctant to report breaches beyond that. We find that that our victim survivors, if a PUV is released from jail and comes back to the family home, that the victim survivor will often give them a new set of keys. There is always that feeling with the victim survivors that not always, but there is overwhelmingly a older people wanting to make sure that the person using violence is still safe and has access to housing, because them sleeping rough is a very big fear of victim survivors. The prospect of living alone can be a significant deterrent to reporting as well, because the concerns that they won't be able to manage on their own without their carer there. Cognitive impairment can also hinder the understanding about the IVO conditions and what actually constitutes a brief, and mental health concerns. So, the person using violence saying to the victim survivor that they may commit suicide, or they might their health will decline as a result of that. And that overwhelming desire to preserve the relationship and fear of losing contact with the adult child is probably the main driver. So in summary, our case model service offers vital support for elder abuse survivors, helping them to navigate family violence and ageing with ease. Developed over 8 years, our program has been adapted to severe cases, always prioritising the victim survivor's voice, health, dignity and wishes. So we will undertake safety planning with our clients with that strong emphasis on dignity of risk and how we can maintain their safety when living under the same roof as the perpetrator. We will work with sensitivity and patience. We take a very collaborative approach and a very tailored approach, because a lot of our clients present very, very differently. And a good example of that is, if a client's phone has been taken off them, we may be able to arrange for a safety pendant, which is used for medical emergencies, and work with the safety companies to implement safe words so that when the pendant is pushed and that word is used, that they know that an urgent emergency response is required. Our service is a comprehensive case management service, and our cases our episodes of care can go from anywhere to 3 months to 2 years. And we have a very creative social work team that are very resourceful in utilising what we have whilst being very vigilant. Now I'm going to jump into a couple of quick case studies. So our first case study is Silva. Silva is an 80-year-old Middle Eastern woman who lives with her 50-year-old son, who is the primary user of violence. He is a very violent individual, and that has resulted in Silva having many hospitalizations as a result of her injuries. But no, neither party is willing to move. They've been living in the same social housing property for a very long time, and they do not want to leave. So when Silva was referred to us, safety planning was crucial because of the extreme risk. We worked very sensitively with her to build trust and ensure that she felt supported. The police warned her the potential of fatal violence. What we also identified was that there was also significant risk to Silva's grandchildren and also to one of her other children because of the Silva was assisting her daughter with looking after the grandchildren, and there was established patterns of meeting in parks and taking to kindergarten and all of those sorts of things. So what we had to also do there was to cease those patterns of behaviour so that we could look at ways that Silva could still have contact with her children, but in a safer way. Both Silva and Micah were offered new housing, which is quite unheard of in this day and age because there is such a shortage, but again, they both declined. So this case was actually referred to the Risk Assessment and Management Panel, which allows for a multi-risk assessment to ensure comprehensive safety and support measures. Through all of this collaborative efforts and sensitive handling, Silva received the necessary response and safety planning, addressing both her short and long-term risks and safety planning. Our next case is Maria. Maria is only 69. She's young, what we would call one of our younger clients, and she lives in a social housing with her daughter, Sky. Sky is the primary user of violence, and she is also Maria's registered caregiver. Sky did not provide care to Maria. However, she wanted to retain the entitlements and payments. Sky moved her drug dealing boyfriend into the social housing, and after a particularly violent attack, an IVO was issued against him, but Sky wanted him to come back into the home. Maria herself was struggling with alcohol and drug issues and was at very high risk of self-harm. She was also heavily provoked by Sky to drink excessively, leading to arguments and police involvement. This was a calculated effort by Sky, and she falsely claimed on one occasion when Maria had been drinking that she was in fact being abused, causing Maria to be misidentified as the person using violence. And the police implemented an IVO on Maria and cautioned against drinking alcohol. So there was a lot of work that had to go on in the background to revoke that IVO against Maria. And whilst that was happening, Sky would continue to provoke Maria to drink, and so that it looks that she would report IVO breaches. We were also having difficulty getting in contact with Maria. We had grave concerns for her mental health as she was expressing quite strong suicidal ideation. So we arranged to meet with Maria's GP that she visited weekly for medication she was receiving. So we went in a back door, had a meeting with Maria and the GP, who in this instance was absolutely fantastic. We were able to get the IVO revoked. We were either able to work with a care finder service in that particular region to secure new housing for Maria. That was, the location is now confidential from Sky, and Maria is living safely and has access to all of the necessary support services. Our next case is Jasmine. Jasmine is an 85-year-old widow that was living in social housing, and she held a gold card due to her late husband's veteran status. Her current partner, Neil, who was not listed on the housing agreement, resided with her and kept several firearms throughout the apartment. Neil regularly sexually assaulted Jasmine. One night, Jasmine fled the apartment and slept at Flinders Street Station until Legacy opened. Legacy contacted the police, but a limited intervention order was incorrectly issued, allowing Neil to return to Jasmine's apartment. Jasmine couch surfed until she was referred to our elder abuse service. We were able to access emergency respite funding through Veterans Affairs and arrange for emergency aged care respite. We engaged legal services to assist us to revoke the limited IVO and obtain a full IVO. When the full IVO was granted, which took months, there was then a delay with Victoria Police issuing that IVO to Neil, and there was quite a lot of work that had to be done to get that done, because there was a hesitancy around what time Neil would be served that IVO so that he could get to safe accommodation. So when it finally occurred, Neil and his son removed all of his belongings from the apartment with Victoria Police present. The firearms were confiscated, and Jasmine was then able to safely return to her home. And our final case study is about Jack and Diane, an elderly couple that were both victim survivors. Jack had cancer, and there was conflict among their children due to a large blended family. One adult son, Richard, had a chronic mental health and alcohol and drug issues and had stolen over $500,000 from Jack and Diane. Despite their children's efforts to get support, Jack and Diane didn't want Richard to become homeless. Richard perpetrated extreme violence against his parents. Jack and Diane actually self-referred to a support to our support program. Immediate safety planning was undertaken, and they were assisted in obtaining a full intervention order. They needed financial assistance to install a security system, and their children the other children became very involved with the safety planning measures. The IVO did not deter Richard. He was very creative in breaking into the property, because he was also stealing Jack's morphine that he was using for his cancer treatment. He was getting through manholes. He really was a great crook. And following one particularly violent episode, we had to assist Jack and Diane to move into emergency aged care respite until Richard was caught and incarcerated. We continue to provide support to Jack and Diane through financial counselling, therapeutic counselling, aged care navigation for Jack, and ensuring their safety and well-being. And that concludes my discussion today. And now I will hand over to Graham.
Great, thanks, Rhonda. So we've moved from research, which gives us some perspective on what the preferences of older people should they be needing to seek support in response of potential elder abuse. Rhonda's, I think, given a very much a hands-on and a frontline response. So what will talk us through today is to take us through the national plan to end the abuse and mistreatment of older people, but just to focus on the 4 areas that are articulated within the plan that are the high-level priorities which will guide the life of this national plan. So the first focus area, so that's the 4. So within the plan, you'll notice there's an articulation as nominated here of the 4 focus areas. And so what I'll do in the next ensuing slides is just to offer some commentary on each of the focus areas. The first focus area relates to an increasing whole of community awareness, engagement and education. So what I'm providing here on the right is like a bit of a meta commentary across what sits within the priority action. So our observation would be that there doesn't seem to be a coordination between federal awareness campaigns with locally based elder abuse awareness raising campaigns, and in Victoria it's the Victorian Elder Abuse Prevention Networks, and we would also observe that the frontline workers were not informed or nor aware that there was a campaign going into field, and were surprised they didn't know about this. So look, I think what this talks to is federal state communication, awareness raising and joint participations, because synergy is the way, of course, to increase communications effectiveness. Another general observation about if we are to increase whole of community, particularly the education and engagement aspect, we would be saying there should be a model for a defined response. So it's clear there's a pathway and a journey for older people to seek help, or family supporters to seek help, that's preferred by older people, their families, or indeed their carers. So what that could look like, for instance, in that pathway and seeking of support, it could be starting with a mobile phone. Where does it go to next? Is it click to link to website? Does the inquiry then get generated? What happens with that next? Does it then go to a particular service? For Vic, we've just got the Elder Abuse Helpline, which is run by Seniors Rights Victoria. And then you would imagine that goes to triage, to service support. So it's all very well to have a message communication. However, we think it needs to be more clearly defined and mapped as to the journey of an older person, family member or carer in seeking of support for an older person experiencing or at risk of elder abuse. This really takes us to the next point, which is the lack of identification of a clear user-friendly pathway. Focus area 2 is the focus area speaks particularly to legal frameworks and adult safeguarding responses. And I would preface this to say that absolutely, this is an essential and critical part of the response to elder abuse, but there are some dimensions that could be considered when it's framed into this focus area. And look, our observation would be that it lends itself to a rigid, legalistic approach that fails to account necessarily for a dynamic, iterative response informed by new research, evolving service models and emerging insights in elder abuse prevention and response. I think we could comment a bit further to say the plan is defined through 5-year horizons. We would be of the view that perhaps you could be considering 3-year horizons so you can be more responsive and dynamic in the response to older people, both through service delivery, communication and engagement when they're experiencing or at risk of elder abuse. Across the responses to elder abuse as defined within the national plan, we think the plan would greatly benefit from funding transparency and balance. We don't think it's mentioned of the tracking or reporting of expenditure across the 3 areas of support, which would be legal, social support, or preventative interventions. This needs to be clearer, we would say, because all of these are integral and essential to make a successful end to the abuse of older Australians. The data from our survey emphasise older individuals' clear preferences for balanced support. Now, this includes protective measures, but also relationship and relational measures. So these would be emotional support, as articulated by Rhonda earlier, relational support, given that elder abuse primarily arises through a family dynamic, and indeed the supporting social dimensions that need to sit along the safety measures. When we look at focus area 3, so this is a focus on strengthening capacity and capability of services, including through targeted education and training for professionals. I think we think drawing on the research and preferences articulated earlier, this needs to be there needs to be a greater stream and acknowledgement of access to preferred help channels. And we didn't think that was particularly well reflected in this priority action list as proposed. We thought there is an omission, and a significant omission, to not recognise the opportunity that existing funded family support services and locations offer as an opportunity for wide locally placed base support for older people, and older people prefer this. So there's a siloing taking place between systems. Currently, across the nation, there are 150 organisations providing family support services, employing 5,000 employees, many of whom have been trained in terms of responding to family violence. And we think this is an omission, and we just wish there was some connection between these two systems of family support. We think within the plan itself, it offers a fragmented view of what families are, because it treats them primarily as perpetrators, but we would say from research and our experience, they can be recognised as protective factors when adequately supported. Survey findings indicate older people's reluctance to escalate issues legally, and they have a desire for a mediated or supportive intervention. So these should feature more strongly when we begin to talk about capacity and capability raising. The last focus area talks to evidence base. Appropriately, internally we get a bit frustrated because it speaks to gaps. We would say, well, we deal every day with gaps, and in fact the gaps have been filled from our perspective. So prevention and protection are very different principles in the delivery of a supporting service. Both are deployed in systems today. We would say, rather than hesitate, respond to today's frontline realities as articulated by Rhonda, and provide the nuanced multidisciplinary support that older Australians are seeking. Preference, in our view, point 2 here, should inform thinking. To do this, a more integrated, dynamic and socially responsive framework is required to ensure that elder abuse is not just criminalised, but prevented and meaningfully addressed through preferred early intervention, education and family-centred approaches. And lastly, in regards to COPS, or community of practice, they're already in existence. In Victoria, we participate and lead a community of practice relating to communications about elder abuse and raising awareness of ageism. So that seems to be another omission, or perhaps a lack of integration, that we could propose. In summary, and I would add here the little bar at the end of this that says, despite this critique, we, as in all the participants today, are all in this together, and we all share the plan's vision. And the plan's vision is that all older people feel safe, valued and heard, have their rights protected and promoted, and live free from abuse and mistreatment. So that's the core value and purpose that we hold to. But look, I think it is good to reflect upon some divergence, we would say, from the plan's intent and from our view as we see it. So we think it's paramount to have the plan focus on the abuse of older people. However, the points we would raise in summary would be that elder abuse responses must align with older people's preferences for trust, accessibility, and relational support. Federal frameworks currently overemphasise legal approaches. This is the national plan, and therefore perhaps that's framing up the nature of the approaches articulated, and that really we think this is inadvertently potentially diminished the response to social and emotional needs of older Victorians as they are seeking. The frontline is already responding and respecting to older people's preference for informal and supportive interventions, case management, social support and advocacy. We invest now. It doesn't have to be known, and there's not a gap in knowledge, there's evidence there. We consider there's a lack of coordinated pathways, limiting access to preferred support channels, as indicated earlier, creates barriers and hesitancy for older people. And then there's the omission, the siloisation of family support systems, and the lack of family support as a preventative measure, we think is an omission within the plan. And the final point we would raise is strategy should integrate older people's voices, prioritise dignity and autonomy, and better integrate social support. So, despite what we say above, we're all on this together and we all share the plan's vision. And at this point, I'll hand across to Bev because we're moving into question time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Graham. Really interesting presentation from all three of you, and some thought-provoking points at the end there, Graham, about how we proceed with a national plan. Look, we have a few questions, so I might just tip in and get to them. Although there's a couple of them I've answered live in the Q&A. So Helen has a few questions for Sarah, so I'm just going to break them up and ask one at a time. Can you just talk, Sarah, to the recruitment of the sample that you spoke about earlier in your presentation?
Yeah, so when we initially launched the survey, we were trying to do our own recruitment, so primarily through Facebook advertisements. That didn't get too much of a response, so we did swap to a paid panel survey. So that's basically where people can sign up to participate in online surveys. And it was restricted to people who are over the age of 65 and who are living in Victoria. I think there was also a question about if it was a representative sample, and the answer is no. Basically, that just comes down to resources. Through this pathway, we could have done some soft quotas around regional living or rural or based on age, but just based on the sorts of people that fill in these surveys, that would have been quite hard. And in terms of getting a truly representative sample, that can cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. So we chose not to take that approach.
I noticed, just a quick commentary too, I noticed there's a dimension within Helen's question about elder abuse, family and extrafamilial abuse. Look, the survey focused on, because remember we're a family support service, so we did use that as a lens and that informed the questions that we asked. But absolutely would acknowledge that abuse doesn't necessarily happen just through the family. It can also be through tradespeople or others. And I think there's opportunities in the future to make a broader discussion on the risk that older people face of abuse in their daily goings and dealings with the external world.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Sarah. And was the do you want to add anything else to Helen's questions, Sarah or Graham?
Yeah, I will just say in terms of how we explained elder abuse, we didn't directly, when it comes to these sorts of sensitive topics, particularly in elder abuse, where even people experiencing it don't necessarily relate to that term. We chose not to use it specifically. So instead, the start of the survey, we sort of had a little bit of an explanation about how as people age, their families or carers might start treating them differently, and it might make them feel, like threatened, distressed, pressured or coerced. So then in the questions themselves, it was very much framed more along the coercion side of things. So if a family member, if they felt that a family member or carer was pressuring them or stopping them from making their own decisions, who would they reach out to for support?
Thanks, Sarah. Rhonda, does Better Place Australia offer national services even though you are Victorian based?
We don't currently. We have been working on a brokerage model based on what we've been doing, and it's something that we've been looking at doing. So it would be something that we would ultimately like to be able to expand as a brokerage service.
Oh, and look, Bev, to be frank, it's also a bit of a lottery as to what service you get, depending upon your postcode, which we think is another issue to raise. So depending upon where you live, be it in Victoria or Australia, will depend the type of service and the appropriateness of the service response you'll get. We think that's a problem.
In Victoria, there's only there's 18 regions, and we're only funded in 5. So people residing in those other 13 regions won't get a specialised elder abuse service.
Mm. Now, that's certainly been part of one of the items in our response to the draft national plan in terms of universal access to services, but particularly the specialist elder abuse services. And while we have you, Rhonda, there was a question, and I can't recall which you will know, but I can't recall the particular case study. But how was the safety achieved if the person, I think it was Silver,
Yes.
remained living with the person causing violence?
With great difficulty, and that particular case was and still remains a very high case, very high risk case, and so there's steps that we put in place with Silver in terms of what to do. If particular things can happen, like if his behaviours are escalating, the services that are available, what her emergency plans are, having alternative forms of communication, spare mobile phones, etc. And I think the biggest thing with Silver is being involved in RAMP and having all of those, a multitude of services involved in her particular case, working together. So there's eyes on him, eyes on her. But it's it is a very tricky balance to get right.
To get right and maintain.
And maintain, and that's exactly right. So
with all of the bumps in the process.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I'm going to go to a couple of questions in a second, but a couple of comments as well. This is from Jason. It's wonderful to hear how people are being supported by agencies who are working together and using care finders. And one from Helen, responses or approaches don't need to be either legal or social. We find the combined approach is effective where we have lawyers and social support workers side by side. The older person can choose the actions and types of support they wish.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I hope, Eliza, I've explained I don't think I've actually answered that in a particularly useful way, but intervention order is the IVO. And I've actually put the link in the wrong question, so in the wrong answer. So I'll happily try and remedy that in the time I have available. Helen asks, Rhonda, what percentage of PUVs, especially in high-risk cases, cooperate with your case managers to address AOD issues, moving out of the older person's home, etc.?
So we don't directly work with perpetrators. So our role in that is to work, through information sharing with those organisations that are working directly with the perpetrator, and working with them to make sure to see what they're doing, so that information can come back to us to help us with maintaining the safety of our clients. So we don't directly work with the perpetrators.
Okay. And do you refer them to other specialist services?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, depending on the circumstance. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Margaret asks, how many, and not directed to a particular person, so whoever would like to jump in, how many of the older adults were receiving mental health services either as a result of the elder abuse and or already were receiving mental health services? I think that might be yours as well, Rhonda.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to say off the top of our head. So on my head, we certainly provide. We have a lot of pathways to different counselling services within our own organisation, as well as external organisations that we work with to support older people. We also, like in the instance of Maria, also helped her with her long-standing alcohol and drug issues, and implemented services for her there as well. But in terms of the services that people were having before they came to us, I don't have that data available to me at the moment.
No, thanks, Rhonda. Look, we are at 1:29, so I might just quickly wrap this up. And I know that there are a few questions that I'm pretty sure we can answer quickly. Sorry, not today, but we'll provide some responses later on in the follow-up from this webinar. But to wrap up, look, thank you all, Sarah, Rhonda, and Graham, for joining this session today and presenting a lot of insights, a lot of information. There's lots of hand clapping going on in the emoji land of Zoom as I speak. And thanks to all of you who have joined us this afternoon. The link to the recording will be distributed to everybody who've registered for the webinar, not just those who've attended, and will be also published on our site, as I mentioned earlier. Next month, the 12th of June, we have Stand Up, Speak Out, a conversation on courage, rights and reform. And this is a little diversion away from our normal lunch and learns. We have Robert Fitzgerald, Age Discrimination Commissioner, EAAA Founding Director and Member of Council of Elders, Russell Westacott, and EAAA Patron Dr. Kay Patterson on a panel reflecting on what it takes to lead with courage, pivotal moments that shape their journeys, and how we can all help to create safer, fairer communities for older people. So I'm hoping I see you all next month. And stay tuned for some more information about Stand Up, Speak Out, because silence is never the answer. Thank you all so much, everyone. Take care. Have a great afternoon.